Some cakes and they're not quite this tall. That's all right. I'm going to try and get 3 layers out of this cake, which looks like it'll probably be very doable because it is a fairly tall cake. But if your cake's half this height, that doesn't mean you don't try to get 3 layers out of it. Get as many as that's reasonable, like ½ an inch thick. You might get 2 out of that cake, and then grab another one and make another layer. There's nothing wrong with putting pieces together, getting layers out of several cakes if you had to, just to make sure that you get the right amount. But you don't want your cake layers to be paper thin, unless that's what you're doing intentionally. I can attest to the intentional part. I know a guy who makes a layered cake that's 27 layers thick. Yeah, really wonderful.
How thick are the layers?
They're paper thin, like 1/8 of an inch thick. And when you buy this cake, it's like about 6 inches tall, and individually layered cake and ganache going all the way up, 27 layers up. It's just heavenly. But you know, there's a lot of work that goes into something like that too.
Imagine if you took that and did different circles in it to create this checker pattern.
Oh yeah, if you did.
Cut that one, it's so cool.
Yeah, if you did chocolate, vanilla, and then you alternated your ganaches, white chocolate, dark chocolate, you could get a really interesting. Well, that's what we call a zebra cake. That's usually what we call a zebra cake, and it's a lot of fun to make. It can be, you know, complex and time-consuming, but that's, hey, you know, time is relative, right? It's one of those things. Sometimes good things take time. All right, I'm going to throw a wet paper towel underneath my cake. The reason I'm doing that is to make the cake stay put. I don't want it to slide around on me. So I'm going to center it here on my board. Yeah, nice and centered. And I've got, as you can see, my offset spatula, my straight spatula. I've also got a small offset spatula just in case I need it. But, you know, it's one of those things. I just keep it around because these are handy. And I've got a good serrated knife. Serrated knife is important. You'll need that. When we go to make a tort, as we would call it, we're going to first trim this cake up. It's got crust on the outside that's fairly hard and crunchy. We're going to get rid of that. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to first spin it around. I'm going to take a look to find out where my lowest spot is on my cake. And I'm looking at the outside edge here. This is a high spot right in here where it's real crusty. But down here, here's a low spot. And I'm going to start there with my knife. And I'm just going to place my knife there. And I'm going to put my hand on top here. And I'm just going to go around the cake, giving a score line all the way around the cake, holding my knife level and holding it still. Once I've gotten all the way around, I've got a score line, so I don't have to work too hard to get through the surface. And then all I have to do now is saw as I'm turning. Now I know this is like chewing gum and walking at the same time. But if you can do this, what you'll do is you'll saw, let the knife do the work. I'm using almost no pressure with my hand. I'm just letting it saw through. And by the time I get to the middle, the top loosens up. All I have to do is get to the middle and turn around and around. And eventually that knife will cut all the way around. Now, that's a good looking cake there. A great looking cake. Okay, well, there is a little problem with this cake. And this kind of thing, you will discover the same thing, I'm sure, because a lot of cakes came out with different symptoms that we didn't see. But this one obviously has a little area in the middle that wasn't baked completely. I think there's just a little bit of a wet spot there in the middle. We'll see if it lasts all the way through the cake. What can I do about that?
Keep going.
Yeah, I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to throw it away. I'm going to fill it with icing. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to use that spot and fill it with icing, and no one will ever know it's there. You know, it'll look a little funny when you look at the profile of my cake because you'll notice this spot that there's no cake there. It's just icing. But I'm not going to throw this away. It's a perfectly good cake. My next layer, 5½ an inch thick. Again, I use my hand to guide the cake. The other reason I use my hand is to keep the cake still. I don't want it to move. Right? I don't want it to slide around on me. So if I'm putting pressure down here on with my hand, I can keep the cake still as I'm turning it around. And as I start sawing, what you'll notice is I'm just going around and around and around until I reach the center. And eventually you'll see the knife come through the hole. Now I grab another 8-inch. This is an 8-inch cake, so I'm going to use another 8-inch cardboard to get my layer off of it. I like to support it because you know how cake is. It's not exactly durable stuff. The hole only lasted 1 layer. So it's just probably the very last little bit of that cake was slightly underbaked. Just that little last bit. I've told you that cake does bake from the outside in and from the bottom up. And that's what happened. And this was the last part. It was probably slightly underbaked. Now, is that a real reflection on the baker? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
You guys can decide how that affects the reflection of the baker. But I did. That cake looked very done on the outside. Looked perfectly good, didn't it? Yeah. So, would you be fooled?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably would be. So, you know, you can't blame Ken and Josh. Chances are they were probably thinking, that looks perfectly good.
I don't think anybody wants to blame Josh.
And what you'll notice I'm doing here is I'm going through the second layers. I hit a spot here in the middle that I think that's either frosty, still a little cold from the freezer, or it's a little moist because I felt my knife just kind of stop. And when I felt my knife kind of tug and kind of get stuck on something, that meant that I'm not going to force it through. I'm just going to kind of work my way around, gently sawing my way to the center. I'm not going to force it because I don't want to destroy the cake.
Man, Jeff, you make that look like a piece of cake.
That's hilarious.
So funny, Sarah.
What I'm noticing here, what I did hit was a little area of density. It's a little dense area here. What that is a little moisture that's left in that cake. It's just a little more dense right there, and it's really cold. So I'm thinking that's what I was feeling with my knife. It felt a little tug as I went through. It didn't feel as soft and loose as the rest of the cake. So now I managed to get this all cut into layers. I'm going to go ahead and line these back up again. And I'm going to take the outside off. So let's get this all nice and lined up. And we're going to get rid of all the crust on the outside. And all I'm going to do that is I'm going to go down the sides and just take the crust off, just like you would taking the slight crust off of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm doing two things here at the same time, actually. I'm cutting the crust off, but I'm also paying very close attention to how much I'm cutting off. If I cut off a lot, then I'll have a lot of cardboard showing on the outside here. Right now I've got about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch showing on the outside. I'm paying close attention to that because as I go to ice this eventually, I'm going to use that cardboard's edge as my guide of how thick I want my icing. So if I bring my tool, if my tool is going right up to the cardboard, when I go to ice this thing, I grab a bench scraper here, and I'm icing this thing, and I use the cardboard as my guide, right? When I go to ice it, I go until I reach the cardboard for my final icing. My icing is going to be about 1/4 of an inch thick, as you can probably see there. Just about 1/4 of an inch thick. Just, you know, a nice, reasonably thick icing on the outside. Not so thick that it's going to start drooping under its own weight, and also not so thin that it's transparent. We don't want to see through the icing. We don't want to have the icing, you know, showing the cake through it because it's so thin. So I'm carefully cutting so that I make sure to have enough space for the icing to cling to the cake and be completely opaque. I don't want to be able to see through it. Again, you'll notice I'm putting very little pressure on my knife. I'm not really pressing down with the knife. I'm actually using those teeth to cut through the cake. And that's a kind of a key move there, because if you press on the cake, it's going to crumble and break. It's the knife will just tear through the cake. And I'm going to go around and look for now every spot that needs to be trimmed up a little bit. All I'm doing is just kind of perfecting it. I like to say that, you know, if you start off with a really good cake, you'll get a really good cake sponge, you'll get a really good cake in the end. It's like making a good photograph. You don't get a great photograph unless you have a good negative, right? So if you have a bad negative that's all, you know, dark and the shadows are all up, you're going to have a muddy-looking photograph. For those of you who remember negatives in film, things like that. Not many people use that anymore.
Yeah, my mom taught a class like that.